Welcome to Big Idea Herdly, where you can learn something new in just a few minutes. Today we listen to Jeff Rubin's A Map of the New Normal, how inflation, war, and sanctions will change your world forever, in which we probe into how global economic shifts, driven by inflation, conflict, and geopolitical forces, are radically altering the landscape of everyday life and financial stability. Jeff Rubin is a Canadian economist and best-selling author. Don't go away! Herdly the editor will be right back with the story. The world is entering a new era where the interplay of inflation, global conflicts, and geopolitical maneuvers is reshaping the very fabric of our economic and social lives. As we delve into this reality, it becomes evident that the forces driving these changes are not only altering markets and economies, but also impacting how individuals, businesses, and governments navigate the future. This book offers a detailed examination of these dynamics, weaving together insights and real-world examples that illustrate the profound shifts underway. One of the most significant aspects of this new normal is the way inflation has re-emerged as a dominant economic force. Unlike the steady, predictable inflation of the past, today's inflation is unpredictable and often exacerbated by external shocks such as war and sanctions. As the book notes, inflation has risen from the grave and reached levels not seen for decades, and it has proven surprisingly resilient against efforts to stuff it back into its coffin. This observation underscores the tenacity of inflation in today's global economy, where traditional monetary policies are increasingly ineffective in curbing its growth. A striking story that illustrates the impact of inflation on everyday life comes from the experience of German households in recent years. As inflation soared, driven by rising energy costs and supply chain disruptions, many families were forced to adopt drastic measures to cope. One family in particular, struggling to make ends meet, resorted to heating their home with wood instead of gas, a choice that not only reflected the desperation of their situation, but also highlighted the broader energy crisis affecting Europe. The mother of the family recounted how they had to gather wood from nearby forests, a practice not seen since the post-World War II era, just to stay warm through the winter. This story vividly demonstrates how inflation, combined with energy shortages, can push modern societies to revert to survival strategies reminiscent of a much harsher past. Another critical shift explored in the book is the geopolitical fragmentation of global trade, which has upended long-standing economic relationships and created new challenges for both businesses and consumers. The sanctions imposed on Russia, for example, have had far-reaching consequences beyond the intended political targets. As the book details, sanctions have not only balkanized global trade and finance into competing regional blocs, but in the process, they have also resurrected an economic demon that we thought was long extinct. This fragmentation has led to the disruption of supply chains, increased costs for raw materials, and a growing sense of uncertainty in global markets. A powerful story from the book that brings this point to life is the case of a small manufacturing company in Italy that was heavily reliant on Russian steel imports. When sanctions were imposed, the company suddenly found itself unable to source the raw materials it needed to produce its goods. The owner, who had built the business over several decades, described the situation as a nightmare I never imagined. Faced with the prospect of shutting down, the company had to scramble to find new suppliers, which ultimately led to higher costs and a reduction in the workforce. This story highlights how geopolitical decisions made at the highest levels can have devastating effects on small businesses and the livelihoods of countless individuals. The book also delves into the concept of economic warfare, where nations use financial tools as weapons to achieve their strategic objectives. This form of conflict, while less visible than traditional warfare, can be just as destructive. The book notes, for the first time in many years, the West is tangling with opponents who have ample economic resources to fight back. This observation is particularly relevant in the context of the ongoing economic standoff between the West and China, where tariffs, trade restrictions, and other economic measures have become key battlegrounds. A compelling story that illustrates the power of economic warfare comes from the experience of a tech startup in California that found itself caught in the crossfire of the US-China trade war. The company, which specialized in developing cutting-edge semiconductor technology, was suddenly hit with export restrictions that prevented it from selling its products to Chinese clients, a market that accounted for nearly half of its revenue. The CEO described how the company was forced to pivot its entire business strategy overnight, seeking new markets and partners while facing mounting financial pressure. This story underscores the unpredictable nature of economic warfare and how it can force even the most innovative companies to adapt quickly or face extinction. As we piece together these stories and insights, it becomes clear that the new normal is characterized by a level of uncertainty and volatility that challenges our traditional understanding of economics and global relations. The forces of inflation, geopolitical fragmentation, and economic warfare are interwoven, creating a complex web that influences everything from the prices we pay for goods to the stability of international alliances. This book paints a picture of a world where the rules of the game are changing rapidly and where those who fail to adapt may find themselves left behind. As the editor of Herdley, by understanding these shifts, we can better anticipate the unexpected and position ourselves to navigate the complexities of the new global landscape. This foresight will enable us to make more informed decisions, whether in business, policy, or our personal lives, and to thrive in a world where adaptability and resilience are the keys to success. The shifting dynamics of inflation, conflict, and geopolitical forces are reshaping our world in profound and often unpredictable ways. These forces are not only altering the global economic landscape, but are also having direct, tangible impacts on our daily lives. As explored earlier, inflation is more than just an economic metric. It's a reality that pushes families to make difficult choices, businesses to pivot dramatically, and nations to recalibrate their strategies in the face of new challenges. One particularly striking story that encapsulates this new reality involves a farmer in the Midwest United States who, due to skyrocketing fertilizer prices, an unforeseen consequence of sanctions and disrupted global supply chains, had to make a choice between planting his usual crop of corn or switching to a less fertilizer-intensive crop like soybeans. The decision wasn't just about economics, it was about survival. The farmer recounted how the rising costs threatened to wipe out his profit margins, forcing him to cut back on staff and reduce his own standard of living. This story is a poignant reminder of how these global forces ripple through to the most local levels, affecting not just markets, but livelihoods. As we reflect on these stories and insights, it's clear that the new normal demands a new way of thinking. The forces of inflation, geopolitical conflict, and economic warfare are not temporary disruptions, but long-term shifts that will continue to define our world. By staying informed and adaptable, we can navigate these changes more effectively and make decisions that position us for success in an increasingly complex global landscape.